It's April 2024 as peak summer arrives in Bengaluru. This is an all too familiar sound and sight in the capital. This borewell is being drilled in Rajarajeshwari Nagar, which is facing a severe water crisis with irregular BWSSB water supply and depleting groundwater levels. While there is a water crisis in Bengaluru, it's not uniform across the city. Bengaluru East is the worst hit. Areas like Whitefield, Marathalli, Mahadevpura, Bellanduru, KR-Puram, among others, fall under Bengaluru East. Most of these areas were added to Bengaluru since 2007, and these have seen a massive spurt in expansion. Home to tech parks, large apartment complexes, gated communities, these areas are dependent on a combination of water tankers, borewells, and inadequate Cauvery water to meet their daily water requirement. So why is it that these parts of Bengaluru are largely affected and the rest of the city like central and north Bengaluru remain oblivious to this crisis? In this video, we'll dig into which parts of the city are actually feeling the pinch and why. We'll also talk about what can be done before this crisis goes out of hand.
So, there's no crisis for Bangalore city as a whole. There is a crisis for about 3.5 million people who are not connected to the Cauvery water supply.
Central part of the city which gets Cauvery supply has a very different situation from the peri-urban areas, which is where most of the population density is and most of the growth is happening, and that area tends to be completely groundwater dependent because Cauvery supply is not yet reached. So right now we are sitting in central Bangalore. In central Bangalore we have pretty shallow groundwater in the sense that and this is not because we are doing, the population density is lower, but our dependence on groundwater is less because we have Cauvery supply. Very different situation in the peri-urban zones which are outside the Cauvery supply area, where everybody is pumping groundwater, but the recharge is also much less. It's really a groundwater crisis that you're seeing.
According to the Karnataka Groundwater Directorate, starting from 2014, the groundwater level has steadily declined in Bengaluru East, with each passing year witnessing further depletion. In 2020, the groundwater level plummeted to 42 meters below ground level. Though there were slight fluctuations in subsequent years, the crisis persisted, with 2023 recording a groundwater level of 30.15 meters below ground level. There are several reasons why groundwater levels have depleted in this region. Lack of rainfall, urbanization, drying up of lakes on one hand, and rampant overexploitation stemming from the lack of effective regulation of groundwater usage has brought this region to this situation today. An early summer this year, on the heels of a drought in the state in 2023, has seen a notable surge in demand for borewell drilling, particularly in Bengaluru East, in the last few months. The deeper borewells are mostly in the peripheral areas. According to a research paper, Deep Drilling for Groundwater in Bengaluru, a case study on the city's overexploited hard rock aquifer system, published in 2017, Bengaluru has roughly around 5 lakh unregistered borewells.
ಈಗ ಈ ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ಸುಮಾರು 2 ತಿಂಗಳ ಈಚೆಗೆ ನಮಗೆ ದಿನನಿತ್ಯ ಒಬ್ಬೊಬ್ಬ ಕಾಂಟ್ರಾಕ್ಟರ್ಗೆ 5 ರಿಂದ 6 ಬೋರು ಅಥವಾ 8 ರಿಂದ 10 ಬೋರ್ಗಳು ನಮಗೆ ರಿಕ್ವೈರ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಸರ್ಕಾರದವರು ಈ ಹಿಂದೆನೇ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಇವಾಗ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಲ್ಲ. ಬೋರ್ವೆಲ್ ಪರ್ಮಿಷನ್ ತೊಗೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತಕ್ಕಂಥದ್ದು ಇವತ್ತು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ 5-6 ವರ್ಷ ಹಿಂದೆಯೇ 7-8 ವರ್ಷ ಹಿಂದೆಯೇ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಕಾರ್ಯರೂಪಕ್ಕೆ ತರೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲೋ ಒಂದು ಕಡೆ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅದನ್ನು ಕ್ರಮವಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ.
In November 2012, the Central Groundwater Authority, or CGWA, said Bengaluru's groundwater is overexploited. Following this, the CGWA implemented a regulation prohibiting the drilling of borewells for commercial purposes within the designated areas. In its latest order, the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, or BWSSB, responsible for overseeing the city's borewells, said people have to seek permission for drilling borewells by submitting applications. Despite this order, at least 60 to 80 borewells are being drilled across Bengaluru without permission, as per sources. When we tried to seek data on permission given for borewells in Bengaluru, neither the BWSSB nor the Groundwater Directorate responded to our inquiries. However, an official in the Groundwater Directorate, who did not wish to be named, said the last survey on the borewells in the city was done in 2004, a decade ago. In 2023, responding to the exploitation of groundwater in Whitefield and surrounding areas, the Groundwater Directorate for the first time cracked down on illegal borewells across Bengaluru.
So groundwater management is completely undercooked. So we have to develop the institutions first. For example, the BWSSB does not have a groundwater cell. So therefore it doesn't exist for them virtually in terms of a plan or a management, right? The law is there's a regulation which has been put in place many years back, but that's more in the breach than in the follow-up of the laws. So groundwater contributes anywhere between 600 to 800 million liters per day. We don't have an exact number on that because no groundwater borewell study has been done, neither are they metered to understand how much water we are drawing out. So because people don't take permissions, and the reason is that if the state does not provide them water, they have every right to provide water for themselves, right? It's the right to life.
Another reason for concern is the silt accumulation in lakes such as Bengaluru and Vartur. Silt accumulation prevents groundwater recharge, leading to a depletion in the groundwater table. The process to desilt these lakes have been delayed by 2 to 3 years, which has also contributed to the groundwater crisis in East Bengaluru. Both Bengaluru and Vartur lakes, spread across a total of 1,200 acres, stopped receiving treated sewage water after the Bangalore Development Authority took up lake rejuvenation work 4 years ago. Jagdish Reddy, an IT professional turned farmer activist, has lived in Vartur for 4 decades. He says 15 years ago, at least 6,000 people were dependent on agricultural activities in that region. It has now come down to zero.
We were growing paddy. Paddy requires a lot of water, right? We were doing that, and now we can't even provide water for drinking purpose. Ponds ಅನ್ನೋದಿತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಬರೀ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆ ಸುತ್ತು ಇಷ್ಟು ನಾನು ಬರೀ ವರ್ತೂರು ಸುತ್ಕೊಂಬಂದ್ರೆ 15 ಮಿನಿಮಮ್ ನನಗೆ ಕುಂಟೆಗಳು ಸಿಗವು.
Jagdish, who owns a 2-acre land surrounded by buildings, used to farm there but has stopped due to water scarcity.
We could see 36 floors, 40 floors construction around here, all of a sudden. And there's so many people coming here every day. Unfortunately, the system didn't raise up to the occasion or to provide all the resources to the people. Now people are under tremendous stress.
According to a Well Labs report, public water supply delivered by the BWSSB is concentrated in central areas of the city where the population is lower than in rapidly growing suburbs.
I think one way which may be a little more controversial to think about is that in central Bangalore, you can think about maybe in periods like this, which are particularly water scarce periods, reallocating some of central Bangalore's water to the peri-urban areas, and letting central Bangalore pull out some of their groundwater, because the rest of the time, pipeline leakage ensures that the groundwater is very shallow. So one key thing that a lot of cities haven't figured out is how to use the groundwater buffer that they have.
Amid ongoing conversations regarding the Bengaluru water crisis, including meeting road demands, treated water, groundwater rejuvenation, Dr. Veena Srinivasan draws attention to one crucial aspect that we are overlooking: the urgent need for a drought plan.
So far, the conversation has been about the baselines. How do we use water more efficiently? How do we bring Cauvery supply? All of this stuff. All of this has to do with meeting growth. It's a very different, and that's kind of in a normal year, you're keeping on growing, you need to improve your supplies. That has actually nothing to do with drought. For a drought year, you need to figure out, there's only a few places you can get water from in a drought year. One is you can get water from groundwater. So by preserving groundwater, that's kind of acting as a buffer between wet and dry years. You're letting it, so it's sort of your secret underground tank. In wet years, you fill it up. In dry years, you use it. So groundwater is a buffer against drought. And then putting in place emergency places that we can get water from, and maybe compensating agriculture for that. So in India right now, we don't have any policy of compensating farmers for water that goes to the city, because we say cities have first priority. But when you have cities like Bangalore, which have obviously much higher GDP or per capita income than the surrounding countrysides, there can be a case made that in a drought year, the city keeps aside a certain amount of its revenue for a drought plan, and then you bring in some emergency measures by spending water. Maybe you have 3-4 emergency sources which are only called on in dry years, and in those years you compensate farmers. So this has been done by Chennai, for example, in the 2003-2004 drought, where Chennai signed a tripartite agreement with farmers saying that for these years we will take over all your bore wells, but we'll compensate you for the crop in this year. So don't grow your crop for this year. And that was an extreme drought. But I think that the way we plan for growth should be different and in addition to the way we plan for droughts. And I think that is something that we haven't talked about in this particular cycle.
Bengaluru's water crisis is exacerbated by a critical lack of regulation, from rampant illegal borewell drilling to missing groundwater cell. While we are not facing an apocalypse yet, the situation is dire. What we urgently need is strong enforcement measures and thorough drought planning to save our water future. With camera person Karthik Govardhan, this is Anagha Deshpande for Deccan Herald.